What's happening, everyone? Pragmatic Addict here. Yes, before I say anything, I am in a hotel room. Don't worry, the reviews are not stopping. I just went out of town for a couple days with Jacob. We're doing some filming. Actually, right after I record this review, I'm going to be heading home. Got a screener for The Holdovers on October 29th. I'm not going to miss that. So, I've actually been saying this a lot lately, and that is that I am not the most experienced or known when it comes to the property that this film is based off of. I wasn't one who was going to catch all the references or Easter eggs, but if there's anything I will say is that this is the first Five Nights at Freddy's movie we gotten, and it is more or less your standard movie runtime. And while I haven't played all of the games and I don't know all of the lore, I have actually played and completed, I will add that, the first game. So, as someone who was hoping that this was going to be just the movie based off of the first game, I was going to be fine with that. But obviously, again, this is a big franchise. It's got a huge following. They're going to throw in some Easter eggs and references. So I will do best as I can. Just, again, noted, I am not coming into this, reviewing this as a super fan, just as someone who just watched an animatronic horror film. Kind of like Willy's Wonderland or something. And lastly, I actually had a screener to get a review for this film up when the embargo lifted, but I didn't attend it for a couple reasons. One, it was an hour and a half or 2 hours away from where I lived, and two, the embargo actually lifted the Thursday that this film came out, so I just didn't have much hope for this film, and I wasn't even so sure that I was going to review it. I would have been just fine with just seeing The Holdovers this week, but since we were out of town and Jacob has been just dying to see this movie, I figured, okay, we got some downtime. Let's go see the Five Nights at Freddy's movie. Why the fuck not? So let's get into this review. So the first thing I want to know before actually talking about everything is this film's rating. So I was before seeing the movie, I wasn't too against the PG-13 rating. I kind of felt like it made sense. I was like, well, it's gonna get more audience in. It has a big kid following fan base. And with talking about the rating, the director actually came out saying that she was really excited to work with this rating because it was gonna give them stuff to actually get creative with. You know, they were saying that they weren't gonna rely on blood, guts, and gore, but more so sound design and just kind of stuff in the shadows and just things to kind of leave the viewer to use their imagination to put the pieces together as to what happened. And I liked that idea. I was like, okay, that is right there. That's actually pretty fun. Then just saying, okay, well, it's a PG-13 horror film. What can you do? But also in saying this, it did kind of catch me off guard when I looked at the rating before, right before seeing the movie and saw that it was PG-13 for strong, violent content. I was excited about that, man. I was like, okay, it's a Five Nights at Freddy's movie with a strong kid following, made PG-13 to get kids in there, but they're also saying that they're gonna push the PG-13 rating. Again, strong violent content. I'm not gonna lie to you, I got a little bit excited for this film right at the last minute. Okay, so let's just actually get into my thoughts on the movie. So right off the bat, immediately, the film does really well, I think, with showcasing the original Five Nights at Freddy's games layout. It wasn't anything that surprised me. I'm not gonna lie to you, this wasn't delivered much different than any other animatronic horror film, at least that I've seen, but just from playing the game, it really mimicked the game's layout fine enough as a movie. But while the movie looked fine, what I want to get into also in saying this is our first taste at the movie's horror and kills, and just kills in general throughout this movie. And that is that they just land so fucking flat. The tension and anxiety and adrenaline that you feel in the first game, where you always feel like there's a threat, you don't ever feel that in this movie. They're happening, and you see that they're happening, and you know that they're happening, you hear that they're happening, but not only after this has happened, but even while you're watching it, you're just already forgetting, and you're just not interested in what the hell is going on. Except for one death, I want to know. It's in the halfway point of the movie, and it has to do with a teenage girl. Without spoiling, I'm trying my best to not go into spoiler territory, but this is a death that you do see happen in the shadows off of a wall, and all I'm gonna say is that the practical effects with that and its execution, they kind of had me rolling, I'm not gonna lie. Now going into my next thing I want to note, which is kind of random and just really I guess not something you're gonna expect me to talk about, and that is Matthew Lillard in this movie. So he was actually one of the only things I was really looking forward to in this movie if I did see it. I am a fan of Matthew Lillard, and I kind of expected him to be a side character, be maybe a cameo. I didn't know what character he was going to be playing, obviously. But not only the second he comes on screen, but just whenever he is on screen, he kind of owns it. It's not really giving us anything that's different from Matthew Lillard. It's just, as a Matthew Lillard fan, he was Matthew Lillard on screen. And I honestly couldn't have cared what character he was playing. Just for what he was doing in this movie, he was offering enough to make it, to like bring the kind of humor, obviously, get me invested with just his screen performance, especially in the first half of the movie, which is an otherwise kind of slow and duller introduction. Now, what I will say, which is an obvious thing to talk about, is the references and Easter eggs. So again, I am not the biggest known person when it comes to this franchise. I've only played the first game, but as a gamer and a horror fan, I know enough about the lore to catch some certain things. But I was surprised at how many of these things I actually caught and how much they actually worked, not with just like a Five Nights at Freddy's based movie, but just as parts to this film in general. So in saying all this, as someone who only played the first game and was kind of hoping for that out of this first movie, but also as someone who knows enough about the lore to catch certain things, they just jam so fucking much into this movie. And I get it, this is a huge property, this is the first movie, it's anticipated. You want to give things for people to take away as fans, Easter eggs, have fun with that, sure. But it just gets to the point where it's not even just Easter eggs, it's just other themes and other stories, to the point where it just gets smothersome, and it's so hard to ignore how noticeable it is that they struggled with how to adapt this onto the big screen. Though going back into the idea of the first game, when the movie was centered on that and that was what it was focused on, you're just seeing this layout recaptured onto the big screen. You're just alone with Josh Hutcherson's character Mike. Just seeing how they pay homage to that game and seeing how they recaptured on the big screen, that is actually when the film is at its best. I'm not gonna lie to you, this film could have been much cheaper, much better, much scarier, and maybe just more respectful if they had actually just made this film based off of the pacing of the first game and just actually off of the title. And some of these other storylines and themes, they not only don't feel sometimes like they're even part of the Five Nights at Freddy's lore, but they're just not fucking interesting. Now, getting back to some of the things that I was kind of excited about, Foxy. He was my favorite character out of the game. He was the creepiest. He was just the funnest. And he was one of the other things where I was I saw his little iconic hallway stance in the trailer, and I was like, if I do see the movie, that's what I'm looking forward to. I love Foxy, you creepy little bastard. But here's my issue with this. He might be, this is gonna go in a little bit of spoiler territory, but just bear with me. I want to say he's maybe the first animatronic in the movie that comes off as a possible threat. And this was in the first act, and that right there kind of rubbed me the wrong way, because I'm at least in my playthrough, I don't think we saw Foxy come into the picture and really do action until the third night. And going into Josh Hutcherson's character now, what I will say is that he's not bad in the film, but, and no disrespect to Josh Hutcherson, but when I found out that he was the main character in this movie, I was like, when's the last time you saw Josh Hutcherson be in a fucking main role? And I will say, it comes off like that. He's trying, he's not bad, but it's definitely he recognizes that he's in a big film. He recognizes that he's in a, big anticipated movie from a big following, from a big property, and it's just hard to not see that he's just going into this film with that kind of mindset. And now talking about characters, getting to the halfway point or so, especially talking on side characters. For example, there's this cop character that comes in the movie where she adds enough depth and story and character, whatever you want to call it, to a degree. There's even actually a scene in the movie, which is probably one of the biggest takeaways for me, where it's a few minutes and she's just talking with Josh Hutcherson's character Mike, outside, and it adds a surprising amount of emotional depth. But not only that, but just enough coverage for me to actually start to give a shit about things that are going on the outside, other than just what I was expecting and wanting out of a Five Nights at Freddy's 1 movie. But now that we're talking about the halfway point of the movie, the writing in general, getting toward the last-ish half of the movie, it just becomes a headache with a lot of things. This mystery side of the story that I actually, again, started to get a little bit invested in, it was also at that point where I was like, wait a minute, we're getting toward the end of the movie. I'm getting a little worried about how this is going to wrap up. Also, the main character, Mike's little sister, comes into the picture more, and what I will say is that she's doing her best as a child actor, but again, just the writing in general from this point on, it's just very sloppy. It all feels rushed, it all feels lazy, it all feels like they didn't really know how to finish the movie to a degree. It was just one of those things where not only as the movie went on, but just in general, it was just a constant, consistent up and down where I was like, okay, that's fine, take that out, leave that in, that's okay, this doesn't need to be here. Weirdly enough though, so there is like a series of dream sequences throughout the movie. Obviously, if you guys are fans of the lore, you guys probably know what I'm talking about. But there was this little blonde kid who's like the main presence of these dream sequences. And just as the movie went on, I kind of respected his performance. He was well written, he was well acted, he gave me enough like to get invested with and curious and kind of care that much about what the hell was going on with this mysterious side of the story. And by the end, what I will say is that just with everything, with all that the film went into and like all that the film tried, it's hard to ignore all that it went for and how you overall, or at least how I overall felt by the end. Like, I would go as far as to say that this is a film that could benefit from sequels. Obviously, it's going to. I think Matthew Lillard even came forward before this movie was released saying that he signed like a 3-movie deal. Like, it's obviously gonna happen. And this is a film, thankfully, that I can see, yeah, that could work. I just don't think that I will be the target audience still, even after seeing this movie and thinking to some degree it's fine. I respected how many things the film went for by the end, but it's still just packed with hits and misses throughout. And overall, I'm going to have to give Five Nights at Freddy's a more than anything mixed review. So that is my review of Five Nights at Freddy's, guys. I'm so sorry about the background, the sound if it's bad, but I am going home right after this, so my next review will be after I catch my screener, because the movie doesn't come out until November 10th in my city, but I am attending a screener for The Holdovers, a movie I am actually very excited for, on October 29th. But with all that being said, guys, I'm going to wrap it up here. Definitely let me know of what you guys thought about the review regardless, as well as your thoughts on this movie. I really want to hear a lot of your thoughts. But with all that being said, guys, I'm going to wrap it up here. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you're having a great day. I'll see you in the next one.